My name is Ben Sundin, and this is my testimony, my story. Um, I felt uh, I felt led to share, um, and so here we go. Um, so I am. Well, when I prayed about what I should share, and I felt led to kind of start from the beginning. So I am from upstate New York. I was born in Syracuse, New York, and from at I was lived there through younger years of childhood up until about 8. My parents got divorced when I was 8, and ultimately at this point in my life, kind of from a big family, a lot of siblings, a lot of some step siblings, a lot of half siblings. My I'm second oldest of a lot of kids, a lot of children, a lot of boys, some girls, but a lot of boys. But yeah, so let's see here. It's from I have an older brother. There's me, and then so I'm the middle of 3 boys originally, and then I have 2 half brothers from my mom, and I also have a half sister from my mom, and then from my dad's relationships, I have a step sister from with my stepmom and my dad, and then they have a son. So I have a half brother from their marriage. So I think that's everybody. So a lot of siblings, a lot of sort of like blended, situations. From different marriages, second marriages, and whatnot, first and second marriages. So a lot of kids. But yeah, so I'm like, this is definitely hard to do. I've never shared my story before, so I'm just trying to share it as it comes to me. So yeah, I do feel led to say though that the life that I have now is not the life that I've always had. I feel like I've always like in the depth of my soul, I've always been a very sort of like a go-getter, and always very sort of motivated to do a lot with my life, and always had big aspirations, and always been a big deep feeler. I feel like that's definitely worth saying. Very sensitive. I'm a very sensitive guy, and that did not always go well for me. It never really went well for me as a kid. I was bullied tremendously as a child, and I think that there was a lot of buried trauma, emotional trauma from going from like my parents' divorce, because I was 8 years old when when my parents separated and then divorced, and that definitely, and I never like had therapy. I kind of like, I don't know why, but for some reason I kind of always made myself seem like the kid that wasn't that troubled by it or that bothered by it. But I know I was. I just didn't really like talk about it. And I don't know. I'm an '80s baby, so I grew up in the '90s, basically. So I'm 38 years old, um, and but yeah, I didn't really talk about my pain. But I remember falling asleep many times, crying at night. So definitely a difficult childhood in a lot of ways. I mean, it wasn't like all bad, obviously, but I definitely did not grow up in like one house and with like both parents. That definitely was not my upbringing. And my I my brothers and I, and with our dad, it was just the four of us for a little while, before my dad remarried. But and then I had my stepsister, who I love so much. She's more like a sister to me. She's been in my life for most of my life, or a very large majority of my life, at this point. But uh, yeah, I didn't have like the typical, I don't even know if that's like a word used anymore, like, a typical upbringing. I didn't grow up with money. I didn't even grow up, I wouldn't even say we were middle class. We were, we were pretty poor, quite frankly. My dad always like kind of had a difficulty, with work. He would like get a pretty decent job, and then that job would like not last. Like he'd get laid off, and so his he definitely struggled with he had his own set of issues, and so him trying to like provide and also be a dad, be a father, be a dad. I can understand, at this point as an adult, that difficulty. But growing up, be that as it may, growing up was like definitely, I kind of sort of feel like I kind of almost raised myself in a lot of ways. Uh, Spending, I definitely, my brothers and I like would spend, some summers with our mom, who lives in Michigan, still at that time, and well, she like has lived, all over too. And that's the other thing too. It's like, growing up in different places. I definitely did not grow up in like one house, like I mentioned. We grew up in multiple homes, and it's not like we were military. It's just my dad would get laid off, we'd get a new job, we'd move. Like it just never really had the opportunity to be in one place, and to set down roots. So, yeah. So. Um, but but it's interesting though, because like growing up with not a whole lot. I mean, we're like and grew up religious. I grew up Seventh Day Adventist, which is believing in, it's Christian, but and um, believe in go to church on Saturday and not Sunday. So it's not Jewish, but it's Christian faith. But I just always, also growing up Adventist, I also felt kind of like an outsider when we'd a little bit, because I'd make friends. We'd move and I'd make friends. I remember when we moved to North Carolina. I spent part of my older childhood years, before I went to high school in North Carolina. And I remember like because of growing up in the religion that I grew up in, we weren't allowed to go to birthday parties, on Saturday because it was Sabbath, and things like that, or go trick or treating because that's Halloween is the devil's holiday. So I definitely always felt very sort of different in so many ways, and we my brothers and I went to a church school. Our church had a school, so it was it wasn't religious. I mean, it was religious, but it wasn't. I mean, it was normal school, but just with a sort of in the church environment. So that's something I don't think about a whole lot anymore. But yeah, it was very much so sort of drilled in me as a child and all growing up. And so I kind of, as I became a little older and older and older, preteen years, teen years, I really kind of had developed this resentment toward religion and toward spirituality. And I definitely, I was a kid, but so I didn't I was always raised to believe, have a relationship with God and, all of that. But I think because again, given how I was raised, and not feeling like I was given an opportunity to be normal. I think in my mind, particularly because also, from a young age, I was always a very sort of imaginative child too. So as I got older, my creativity, continued to evolve and grow, and but because again of the religious reality of my upbringing, me wanting to be an actor when I was a kid, or a design, or when I was a kid I wanted to do a lot of different things, but I couldn't wait to grow up so that I could have my life, have a life that I chose for myself. And I remember particularly, I think I was 11, maybe 11 or 12, and I really I knew I wanted to be an actor or a performer, and at that time I really didn't know what it meant, because again, the bubble sort of that I grew up in, I kind of I knew about Hollywood and New York and all that stuff, but and Broadway and whatnot, but I didn't know that much about it. And I just knew that that was worldly and that was secular, and that wasn't allowed. I wasn't allowed to do any of that. And so, but I do find it interesting because I remember I played Jesus in the church school play. I was given that role, and which is the lead role in that story. And I remember actually after, and I was so dedicated to that role. And I remember, I don't know how, it was a while ago, obviously. So, but I remember being so dedicated and putting everything I got into memorizing the script and being off book, and I took it so seriously. And then I don't remember the entire play and the entire performance, but I remember, the spotlight and just being so into it. And I remember afterward, actually, somebody came up to me. There were a lot of, I got a lot of accolade for it, from it. But I remember someone saying you need to go to Hollywood, you're gonna be a star. And that just sort of stuck with me, but not. It just kind of sort of pushed me a little further into the direction of, I need to get out of my family. Like, I need to get away from my family. Of course, I was like so young at that time, so it wasn't like I you know, um, like, where was I going to go? I was like, 11 or 12 or whatever. But it definitely planted something in me that I knew I was, I knew I wanted to do big things with my life. And so, fast forward a little bit, to, I was also like, I can't forget, when I was 13, actually, I had a really bad accident. I fell off my bike, and I fell on broken glass. In one of my friends, I had gone over to a friend's house to see if they were, if they could play, and I was waiting. I was like sort of riding my bike around their in their driveway and stuff, which you shouldn't do. I know that now, but I like fell off my bike and fell on broken glass in their driveway. It's not like I could see the glass; it was like hidden in like some leaves, and I like literally, and it like cut open my wrist. It barely missed my artery. And I did recover from that accident, but it was a close call. It was like, it was something that was really traumatizing, and it took a very long time to heal, and really disrupted my life for a long time. I think it was like a year and a half of my life. I think something like that. Of missing school and going to occupational therapy to get like the use of my hand back, basically. And it's still not 100%, but it's close to that. So, but that was obviously a very traumatic experience. But so I felt like that was necessary to mention. But to kind of speed up a little bit, one of the ways I knew I could get out of the house, because I growing up again in the environment that I grew up in, it wasn't the environment that I wanted to stay in. I knew I needed to get out. I ended up going to boarding school for high school in Michigan, and I chose boarding school because I do have family in Michigan, and so it was a place that I could go to that I wasn't like entirely on my own, and I had like a cousin that went to the same school, so I wasn't entirely alone when I went into that environment, or went into when I did my first year of high school, like kind of homeschooled in North Carolina, and then I went to Michigan for the rest of high school. But it was a private school, and so the reality was going into that school was I had to work. And so I couldn't afford to, because of being from the family that I was from, my dad couldn't afford to pay my tuition. I don't remember. It was like $12,000 or $13,000 a year, which, for, high school, the only way I could pay for it, and it was paid for like family contributed. I was on like an assistance program kind of. But a big part of how I had to pay for it was by working. And I was put in I remember I was put in the cafeteria like the first week of school or something like that, and I was like, I can't do this. Like, I can't work in a cafeteria. It's before, like, growing up, I had done like lawn businesses, and sold calendars from the school, the church school that I went to, and I was very like sort of business savvy. I felt like in a lot of ways. You kind of get that way when again, like growing up, I didn't have any money. Like my dad didn't believe in giving us an allowance, and so like we had to work for everything. Like if I wanted a toy, I had to go and like earn the money to go buy it. I literally. And I wasn't handed anything. So it was for me. So anyway, by the time I got to high school, I really was not interested. It wasn't that I wasn't interested in being in the cafeteria. It was just it was such a small amount of money for like how much work was involved. And I remember like having, maybe it wasn't the first week of school, maybe it was like a couple weeks in, but I discovered this opportunity to take take these like religious books that take books basically door to door, like basically door to door sales. There's this like door to door like opportunity, and I was like, okay, what is this? So I like had to memorize all these scripts and to all the stories and descriptions of what was each book that I was carrying and selling. And I remember of course I didn't really know, I had never like really sold anything, but particularly like door to door. But anyway, I did the job. I started the job, and this is like again in Michigan, and I wasn't from there. I didn't know, but I remember like being pretty good at it. So and even as a teenager, I guess you could say like I was a pretty, even though I was really sensitive, I was fairly extroverted. So I was pretty I was pretty talkative, I guess. And so it was terrifying, like as a 15-year-old boy, like going knocking on doors to like pitch someone to like buy a book from you, and they're like religious books because they're like the books from my church. So yeah, that was an interesting time. And like I did it all through winter. Like it was not I did it all year round. I did it in summer, I did it in winter, because I ended up making enough money to like really assist in paying my tuition. And so my family and the school that I was going at, my school, they were like, yeah, you're doing like pretty well at this, so just keep going, keep doing it. And so I did it for like several years. Actually, I did it for like 3 or 4 years, like total. And that definitely contributed, I think, a lot to my independence. Even though I was kind of sort of forced to do it, not forced. No one forced me to do anything, but like I definitely felt like I was being sort of pushed sort of to do it because it was something that was helping me pay for school, and it was also like a positive thing. So it wasn't like I was selling cookies or something. It was spiritually enriching, not just a financial benefit to me. So yeah, so I got through high school, and but something that I have to also mention about through high school was sort of my getting closer and closer to adulthood, and realizing like obviously making a choice and making a decision on like what I wanted to do professionally in a professional career. And I at that point in time, like I had done choir, and like I've been involved in performing related things, but my acting wasn't on my radar. But the arts certainly were. And, being, I think it was in my junior year or so, I really became interested in, I had had an interest in like, obviously I was, as a kid, acting and character work, as a kid was really something that I, was attracted to. But then, because of my upbringing and religion and association with, that, I kind of, I never thought about that as a real, opportunity or a real thing to pursue. So I kind of forgot about it. And, but then in high school, I became really, 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 really interested in fashion. And, I remember having like a roommate who was, really stylish and, really cool guy. And some of the other guys in my class, were really into like, at that time, like, I got really into like, Abercrombie and Fitch and things like that, that kind of style, but sort of preppy, I guess, style. I became really interested in that. But fashion design, really became something of interest to me, and ultimately, and I found a school in Massachusetts, that I could go to. And the reason I also, and which was a Seventh-day Adventist college, by the way, it was a school that, to my knowledge, it's been closed for a little while now, but, because of the being in the Seventh-day Adventist system and the religious system that I was in, I definitely knew that I like needed to, at least I felt like I was sort of obliged to stay in that system. And so I went from, an Adventist high school to, I graduated, and then, I, ultimately ended up at this, Adventist college in Massachusetts. And that does, it no longer exists now, but, to my knowledge. But interestingly, though, before all of that happened, I it was in between graduating high school and, ultimately, being at this, college, where I, discovered my sexuality. I had been actually doing the door-to-door book, selling thing, but in California. And so I did it in Michigan, primarily, a little bit in Ohio, mostly Michigan, frankly, in high school. And then I did spend one summer, out in California, in the sort of Inland Empire of, Southeastern California. And it was out in California where I realized I had a moment. I had an experience. It wasn't like an inappropriate experience or anything like that. It was just, I had an experience, and I was like, I'm gay. Like, now it all makes sense. Like, I had been struggling with my sexuality for years. But when it was like I was 19 when that happened. And I, part of also the reason why, I came to Massachusetts for college, was that it allowed me to be as close to New York City as I possibly could get, at that time. Because I couldn't, like, I was this like kid from, upstate New York / North Carolina, and then Michigan, ultimately, from high school, with like no money, no, it's not like my parents were supporting me. I was 15 when I went to boarding school. I like worked door to door. I barely went to this private high school to like, private boarding academy to like go to high school. I had no money. I was doing life on my own in a lot of ways. But I discovered, I wanted to be creative. I wanted to be in the arts. I wanted to, be a fashion designer at that point in time. and I just remember being so like obsessed with New York and being, in the industry, and, like The Devil Wears Prada, like, came out in 2007. I remember when that happened. That was like one of the first, films that like excited me. It like brought life into me. But of course I was, so fascinated by the fantasy of it all. But the fantasy was what really ignited inside of me to keep me going for all of those years, and what the motivation and the aspiration, and of course, like, and then I was implanted all this, like, hard work in me, going door-to-door sales, like when I was a teenager. I mean, in all the different elements, from the cold and snowy winters of Michigan to going to California and going door to door in the 110 degree heat, when I was out there. But all of these sort of like things that I did, I was like, well, if I can do that, then I can do anything. And I think that's the one thing with like not coming from very much. You sort of develop this work ethic to be able to just sort of handle anything life throws at you, and not quit, like not give up, frankly. And so I, and then my sexuality thing happened, and I ended up, going back to Massachusetts to continue school. There were a lot of things that happened in that school, though, that some drama, and the school, I found out the school was closing. So long story short, I ended up in Boston. And again, like, I ended up in Boston because a friend, some friends of mine were going to school in Boston, and again, I couldn't move to New York. I didn't have the money to go to New York, even though I was like, I need to go to New York, I need to go to New York. That wasn't an option. And so I figured, okay, I'll go to Boston. Boston is close to New York, sort of, and it's an opportunity, right? So I slept on my friend's couch for like however long that was. And it wasn't long after I moved here, and I still live here 19 years later. Well, I mean, a lot's happened, but I slept on my friend's couch, but at that point in time, though, I was like, I was sort of disassociated and detached from my like Adventist upbringing. Like I wasn't, I didn't consider myself an Adventist anymore, and I wasn't Christian. I wasn't like, I was still like, I thought I was a good person. I was still a nice person, and treat people well. But I didn't like consider myself religious or anything like that. I definitely was embracing sort of my like worldly self. And I just, I came here with all this aspiration and drive to do what I knew I wanted to do, which was to be successful, and to be a business person, and to be a designer, and all that stuff. And to I remember when I was 20, I was finally like 22 at this point. I was 21 when I moved to Boston, but I was like 21, 22. And I knew, like, I wanted to be a household name. I wanted to be a big brand. I was just so, I had aspired to do so much. I was aspiring to do so much. And I had all this, like, dream for myself, this vision. And, I was a pretty big go-getter at that point in time. And again, kind of living sort of through this fantasy of like, I can do it, I can do anything, right? And I guess, yeah, the better word to use is like, I was a really sort of typical naive, like 22-year-old. And not knowing that at the time, of course. I moved to Boston, like I mentioned, and I wasn't, again, I wasn't like, really holding on to, I was finally like living for myself, you could say. And I, I worked really hard, and I played around, partied a little bit here and there. I wasn't a big partier or anything. And I had, but I had also not finished college. Because again, I was, financially not really, financially was just very difficult for me to like stay in school. And I did end up at a college here. I did like a semester. I think it was like a semester. I think I did one semester at like at one school, fashion design. But then, I left that school because I couldn't continue paying the tuition. And I just decided that I was going to work. I was going to work for like a couple years to like save some money. And that ended up not working out very well for me. I was trying to afford to, pay my chunk of the rent. And by the way, I was like sleeping on my friend's couch. Like I had no privacy. I didn't have a room. I didn't have a bed. I was sleeping literally on a couch. And so and then, at that time I had met somebody who was willing to help me out, and so I like became like sort of a live-in like houseboy, and that situation lasted for like 6 months. It was not long, and then I ended up in New York City for like 4 or 5 months, and lived in like right across the Hudson River in New Jersey, and that was like I learned a lot, but that was like a really big mess of an experience. And but then I moved back to Boston because I couldn't really, I couldn't get my foothold there. So I moved back to Boston again for the second time, and I remember thinking, okay, this time I must I have to just decide that I'm gonna stick with this, just stay here, be here. And I remember it wasn't too long after that that I met somebody, and meeting him kind of changed my life in so many ways. I definitely, you know, meeting him opened a lot of doors. At least at the time, I thought, and like, he was successful at work. He's older than me, a lot older than me. So I'm not going to share very much about him because this is my testimony, and I'm not making this about him in any way, shape, or form. But he's an older guy, and successful in his own way. And but when I met him, I was 22. This was like I was a kid basically. I mean, I was an adult, but I was I was really young and naive, and but I was really driven and really motivated. And he saw a lot of things in me that I was authentic. I was being myself. I wasn't trying to be someone else. And and I fell in love with him like pretty quickly, I would say. And but something about that part of my life that really changed, and it didn't change until like maybe 5 or 6 years in, was so something that I've kind of left out of this story was the fact that like, you know, I wasn't really like a drinker per se. I wasn't a drinker until I was, until I really became, until I got into my relationship with my now ex-spouse. I wasn't really a drinker. I wasn't like a heavy drinker. Excuse me. And I'm not saying like, you know, oh, like he made me like an alcoholic or anything. I'm not, definitely not saying that. But I, you know, I drank before I met him. I wasn't, not a lot. I definitely wasn't like a big drinker, like I mentioned. But I would say that like, you know, everything, not just like, you know, and I'm not gonna like blame it on anything or anyone, but being in, at least for me, being in a community, being in the gay community where so, and particularly in the life that I had with my now ex, is so much of what we did was like alcohol related. I felt like so, like everything was, you know, a cocktail party or let's meet up for drinks, or, but also like I now understand, you know, looking back now, that, you know, that is very much so also like just a very worldly thing. That's a very sort of like, oh, it's a very societally normal thing, right? Like everything is, you know, sort of focused around drinking and you know, inebriation, like, you know, in so many ways. It's just societally normal. And so, but being in that environment for so many years, you know, it just sort of became my life, clearly. And you know, I didn't necessarily like struggle with drinking. I didn't struggle with alcohol until really, actually, I mean, the pandemic really is what kind of triggered everything. But for a long time in my life, you know, I did feel this sort of, you know, comfort of not having, you know, my life with my now ex was pretty comfortable. I mean, you know, again, growing up, not having much, not having money, not having things, not being able to just like go out and, you know, lay down a credit card and buy whatever you want, you know, like that life. I didn't have that life. And like, so, you know, with him, my life was dramatically, quote unquote, better in my mind, you know, particularly at the time. But, you know, for me, like I had felt like, you know, I deserved it. Like I grew up with, you know, nothing but so anyway, my life my life was very much so kind of a fantasy. You know, it was like I was living like my real life fantasy almost. But it was real life, you know, it wasn't made up. It wasn't like, you know, it was, you know, we had the condo in Boston and we ended up ultimately had a second home. You know, we'd go to a weekend home in Maine and, you know, go to, you know, friends' places in Florida and, you know, New York or wherever, you know, and then I had an apartment in New York for 4 years, you know, or for a number of years. But, you know, and that's also part of my story was, you know, this notion of like, you know, but drinking became such a heavy part of my life. It went from like something that I, you know, but over the years it just sort of became that way. And, when I lived in New York, I experimented with like different drugs and things like that. And so I've like kind of done it all. Not all, like I haven't done everything in the book, but like I've definitely experienced a lot. And I ultimately, um, the pandemic happened. And I would say that, like, my life with my ex, with my life with my husband at the time, we had a number of good years. At least they were like good. It seemed good. And obviously everyone has their issues, their troubles, their everything. But I definitely struggled with my identity. And, obviously being married to somebody who's older and who is successful, and sort of leaning on that for a very kind of like a long time, and kind of getting really comfortable in that life. I didn't really feel the need to push myself very hard, and I didn't for a long time. Admittedly, I like, now looking back, I'm like, yeah, I got really comfortable. I kind of got lazy, frankly. And I just got sort of sucked into my world, this world of, again, sort of leisure. And I drank a lot, and I drank a lot. And ultimately, the pandemic definitely turned my life upside down. I mean, long story short, the pandemic happened. I got the excuse, like a lot of people, I think, to start like day drinking. And I don't necessarily know that my drinking per se was the reason why, like, my ex wanted to break up with me. But I don't think that was the reason per se. But long story short, like, he ended up breaking up with me. And about 3/4 of the way through 2020, this was in 2020, and I I I was devastated. It turned my life upside down in an instant. Um, because again, like, really I hadn't really worked in years. That was another part of it, with this sort of life of leisure. I had gotten very comfortable and okay with like not working, not okay, but just like and one thing, led to another, and he was just like, we're done. I don't want to do this anymore. And, you know, I ended up it definitely ended up throwing me into a tailspin. And alcohol really, really became something that and at the time, I didn't think that this was true, because I didn't want to like admit that I had a problem or anything. I didn't think I had a problem, but I was definitely very accustomed at that point in time to rely, like numbing my pain. My also, like, my marriage was, definitely probably not the relationship that I should have been in. But I was in it, and so it happened, and that's part of my life. But I alcohol just I became very reliant on drinking, and I became very reliant, very dependent on alcohol. And I, after moving out, there was like a year, and there was like the first year, the first year and a half, or the first 2 years of like living out on my own. The first year, I would say, of living out on my own, I tried to kind of make it. I like, I tried to do things on my own. I tried to have like a normal life, by, having a job, a normal, like not much had changed, basically, except for where I lived. But I was drinking all the time. And I just remember thinking, oh, I need to take a break. I need to detox. But I remember, from 2021 through 2023, because I moved out in 21, and I've been living where I live now, since then. It wasn't until, well, I had been like a regular drinker for years at that point. And I certainly like thought it was normal. I wasn't, I didn't think I was like, anything special. Like I didn't think I had a problem per se, with my alcohol consumption. I didn't drink in the morning until that started. But yeah, I definitely did not realize how much of a problem I had with alcohol until 2023. And then, but basically, I knew that I was suppressing all of this devastation and this emotional trauma, with drinking. But also because of my personality and who I am, I've always been this sort of like happy, like, at least that's how it looked, optimistic, positive person. But I was drinking every day. I was drinking every single day. And, life's problems didn't like go away. Different things, happen, and, life is a roller coaster, right? And so, but I never really dealt with my issues, ever. I just, tried to sort of, keep going, right? Keep going in life. And I ultimately, my life just kind of slowly began to, like unravel. And I particularly like it was like the last year and a half before I quit drinking, where I was drinking every single day, pretty much. It wasn't until about, I'd say maybe 6 months to a year, I can't remember exactly at this point, where drinking in the morning started and it wasn't like I was getting like wasted in the morning, but like I would be wildly hungover, from the night before, and I would have to drink in order to like function in the morning and or in the afternoon whenever I got out of bed, basically. And again, like, because of my circumstances from my divorce, and I can very much so say that uh, my 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 marriage ending in so many ways sort of put me in this spiral, because I didn't know what I was going to do with my life, and because I really didn't like have my own identity, like I had mentioned a little while ago. I did not have my own identity. And at 30 something years old, I didn't know who I was. And I used booze, I used alcohol to mask. And I masked and I masked and I masked for years. And it wasn't until and then, well, I was gonna say, but I knew that I really started experiencing, actually, I'll just get into that part of it. I had started experiencing certain like symptoms, like from alcohol abuse, from consuming so much alcohol on a regular basis. But I thought, oh, I'm so young, like I can't, like nothing's happening, like it's just, it's all in my head. I had sort of started feeling like, the lower back pain, but it was very faint, but like it was there. But I thought, oh, it's, like I'm trying to get healthy again. Like maybe it's from, whatever. I was avoiding the realities, right? I was avoiding the symptoms. And but sort of fast forward to a little bit to, so I've been drinking like pretty much every day for like a year and a half, something like that. And before then, I was drinking all the time anyway. It wasn't like I was a casual drinker. It was all the time. Everything was an excuse to drink. There was a reason to celebrate all the time, right? That was my mindset. That was my life. I ate out a lot. I had alcohol delivered to my apartment all the time. There was a liquor store run all the time. And because of the apps too, you can just like have it delivered. It's so easy. Alcohol is so accessible in the world we live in now. But I had tried to detox maybe once or twice, but like not really successfully. So in like a year and a half time, I probably took off maybe 2 whole weeks of drinking. That's it. And before then, I had not really detoxed much at all. And so it's really surprising, actually, that I would say lasted as long as I did, drinking as much as I did. But I kind of really having some scary mornings, where I was waking up feeling just really horrendous, physically, mostly, obviously. And I would like you know, pour a shot of, you know, whiskey or vodka, and I'd mix it with some juice or something. And I would like, and this was like not long after I waking up, like getting out of bed. But I'd be like so miserable from being hungover that I would like, you know, I knew I had to drink in order to feel better. And like I wouldn't even like have any water. I would just go straight to the alcohol, and I would try to consume it. And like also too, like pouring and pouring. Like I went from like using shot glasses to having to just use cups because I would be so shaky that I couldn't pick up a shot glass. Or I would pour, I remember actually, this was like the last few months before I ended up getting help, where I would pour like wine into like just a water glass so that I could like lift the glass because I was so shaky. And it was bad. It was horrendous. It was horrific. Those memories scare me to death, because I remember how bad it was, and how like, and also just how miserable I felt, and how much I needed to drink in order to feel better. And I'm trying not to like glorify alcohol here, but like I had, because I don't want to talk about it too much, but it was such an integral part of my life. Like it was every day, it was all the time. And I was like, yeah, I was like 34, 35. That was like sort of that year, 33, 34, 35. And I just remember though feeling, I had gotten to a point, I had also like gotten to the point where like I would be brushing my teeth in the morning, like after having a shot of whatever, or having wine and a shot, you know, just to feel a little relief. And then I would like be brushing my teeth, and I would like, I remember actually like I was brushing my teeth once, and I threw up in the sink, and there was what looked like blood. Not a lot, but there was some like red in my vomit. And I had thrown up the alcohol. Like my body was trying to purge this poison out of me, because I had just drank in the morning. Like, and I don't know what time it was, but it was the morning, and I needed to be somewhere that I had committed to, and so I knew I needed to drink so that I wouldn't be shaky. And so I was getting ready, of course, and I threw up in the sink, and I was also like, my face was puffy and like red, and I mean, I looked horrific, and I felt horrendous. I felt like death, and I think that it had only happened twice, and not too long after that, you know, when I was at a place in the day, I realized, after experiencing sort of several, just 2 or 3 of these experiences where I knew I had gotten to a really, really bad place. I was like, I really think I should go to the doctor and have a physical. And to be honest, I can't believe that I did this, but so my physical, my doctor's appointment was in the morning. It was like 10:45 in the morning or something like that. It was like almost 11 o'clock in the morning. But because of my lifestyle at the time, my drinking, Of course, I was hungover again the next day, the morning of my doctor's appointment. And because of my drinking problem, um, I had to drink in order to get prepared to go to the doctor. And at that point in time, I was drinking enough in the morning to where I was like probably legally drunk. That's how bad it got. It wasn't just like I had to, drank a little bit to make the shakes go. No, like I was tipsy, like technically. But because I was drinking all the time so much, it took a certain amount for me to drink in order to make the shakes go away, which was definitely enough to make one drunk. But like, because I was so dependent on booze, I could function. I could basically function. It certainly functioned enough to drive and all that stuff, which is terrifying, but that's how it was. And I remember drinking enough. I don't remember how much I drank per se, but like I drank enough to go to the doctor. So of course I'm consuming alcohol before I go to my physical in the morning. And I ultimately, I don't remember. I don't really remember like what exactly I said, but I probably didn't like tell all of the truth. Like I definitely lied, throughout parts of my physical. I had admitted though to my doctor sometime before that I had been drinking 2 or 3 bottles of wine a day, depending on the day. And so he did know that I was drinking a lot, but I didn't even, to my knowledge at the time, I didn't even consider that like excessive. Like I thought because of my lifestyle for so many years, I didn't think that was like a lot. I mean, I knew it was a lot, but like it just didn't really like occur to me that yes, Ben, that is a wild amount of drinking, for anybody. And so anyway, I had blood work done. They could like barely like draw blood because I was so dehydrated from all the drinking that I was doing all the time. It took them forever to draw enough blood to do the lab work. Of course, I was like super bruised and whatnot. Anyway, a couple days later, I got a phone call from my doctor, and my numbers, like basically the numbers that represent your like liver health, liver and kidney health, were stratospheric. And my doctor said to me, you have 2 options. He's like, you either need to go to the emergency room right now, like tonight, and ask for a medical detox. You need a medical detox. Or you need to find a facility that you can check yourself into and stay there while you get the help you need. And he's like, and I don't remember exactly what he said in this phone call, but, and by the way, like while I'm hearing this, I had not been consuming alcohol for a couple of days, not really, because I got myself to the point where I knew I needed to detox. And so I was like going through the motions of not drinking, really. And I don't remember if it was day 1 or day 2, but I know that day I had like not had any alcohol, I don't think. And it was like, I don't know, it was March, it was early March, so it was still winter, it was still dark outside. Like at that point it was like 6:30, 7 o'clock almost, I think, in the evening. I remember it was a Wednesday, and I just remember thinking, this is serious. Like, I knew it was serious. Like, when he mentioned, he was, the tone of his voice, and him telling me that, my numbers were through the roof, off the charts. Again, I don't remember every detail, but I do remember him saying that, like, you need help right away. And he's like, have you had anything to drink today? And I said, I no. And he was like, so, and I will say this, I will quote him on this. He's like, as your doctor, I'm not allowed to tell you to drink, but I'm also not going to tell you not to drink. Because I didn't know this at the time, but if you are as dependent on alcohol as I was, you can have an alcohol withdrawal related seizure that can kill you. And of course, I didn't know this at the time. And so, but then he explained to me what I just said, and it freaked me out. And of course, like, I was super shaky because I hadn't had anything to drink. I was super shaky. And I grabbed a bottle of wine. I had a bottle of wine, a corkscrew, or a screw cap. And I poured a glass of wine, and I guzzled it. I drank it so fast, started feeling a little better, poured another glass of wine, got to a point where I wasn't super shaky as much. I was still shaking, but it wasn't major tremors or anything. And at this point, I was not on the phone with him anymore. But I remember him saying specifically, you either need to go to the ER tonight, find an emergency room. We live in Boston. There's so many emergency rooms in Boston. Or you need to call a facility and see if they have a bed available. And I'm thinking to myself, what is, I was like, this can't be happening. But something else that terrified the crap out of me at the time, in that moment, was if I didn't get any help, if I didn't get the help I needed, I was going to die. He said, if you don't get help right away, if you continue to do what you're doing, you're gonna die. He's something that I do recall him saying that scared the living daylights out of me was, he said, you might have days, you might have a week, you might have 2, if you're lucky. And when he said that, I knew that I needed help. I knew I needed help. I admittedly had tried, like I said before, I had tried to detox. I had tried to take breaks from drinking, but I never thought I had a problem. I never wanted to admit that I had a problem with booze. I never wanted to admit that I had a drinking problem because I didn't want to be that person. I did not want to be that person that admitted to themselves that they had a problem. And after I was off the phone with him, after I had consumed a little bit of wine to stop shaking so much, I like just sort of stood in my kitchen and I just thought to myself, what is going on? I just found out that I have only a very small amount of time to live if I don't make a change. And I remember, I'm standing right over there. And I remember looking up, being absolutely terrified, because I knew I didn't want to die. I knew I didn't want it to be all over yet. And I looked up and I lifted up my hand above my head and I said, Lord, I need help. I said, Lord, help me. I was like, I know I'm an alcoholic. I need help. And the moment I said those words, there was an instant peace that came over me that I can't explain. It's not like I was instantly healed or that life just instantly became better. But in that moment, I knew I wasn't doing it alone. After all of those years of trying to do it alone and doing it on my own, trying to do it on my own. And then a few days later, I ended up in rehab. Actually, it was March 10th. So it was March 10th, 2024, when I checked myself in to a facility, which I never thought that would be my life. And I haven't had a drink since then, since March 10th, 2024. And it has not been an easy road. But I will say that the only way that I was able to do any of this was by surrendering. And I didn't even know that I did that at the time. But by making that first step of admitting that was the first step. And then it was actually like when I was in rehab, when I was in rehab, it didn't end there, because like for the first 2 weeks of being in there, like my numbers hadn't changed. I legitimately believed I was gonna die in rehab by myself, alone, with nobody around me that knew me, because my liver, through blood work, hadn't shown any signs of change. No healing had happened, not to my knowledge. And I legitimately believed that I was gonna die in rehab, alone. And probably like die in my sleep, or I don't know. And I remember like actually, I forget if it was the first or second. It was the second week. It was the beginning of the second week, and I had gotten my blood work done, and I was devastated because I thought, oh, well, I haven't had a drink in a week. Like, I expected some change to have happened. And I remember one night before I went to bed, and I prayed. I was sobbing, and because I was so terrified, I thought I was gonna die. And I prayed, Lord, if you preserve me, if I live, if you preserve my life, I will commit the rest of my life to you. And so here I am. I am definitely not perfect. I'm not a perfect person. It's been a long journey. It's been a very long journey. I started with admitting that I had a problem. And from there on, was able to start healing and start the work to move my life forward, to stay alive and to move my life forward. And I also wasn't completely sober, because I was also using cannabis products, and I was also a smoker and a vapor. I did all of it. I had every bad habit pretty much. And I actually, it was May. I quit nicotine products in May of 2025. So it's been a little over a year since I vaped / smoked. And then last fall I quit cannabis products. So I've been living completely sober for it'll be a year in November, which is really, really amazing. And it's the best thing I ever did. I mean, living life, feeling everything isn't easy. But it's also kind of my superpower now, because I know God's in control. I know that. I know God's in control of my life. I wouldn't have been able to do any of this without the power of God in my life. That's the thing. Something that I have to completely, fully disclose and admit is that I have zero desire to drink. I have zero desire to smoke or vape, or really, frankly, to get high. Anything that is and it is due to my just giving it to God. Surrendering everything and doing it over and over and over again is my miracle, is the miracle. It's not a magic trick. It's not just willpower or discipline. I mean, it's those things too. It's discipline. It takes the repetition of doing it over and over and over again to also kind of believe in yourself, because you do have to believe in yourself. You have to want it to not do it. You have to want to not do it to not do it, right? But I believe with all my heart that because I gave it to God. I didn't even mess with it. I didn't even flinch. I just gave it to God, and I have not had one moment where I wish that I drank again, or like I don't desire it at all. It's pretty remarkable. And I'm just, I probably, there are probably details that I didn't mention, that I forgot about, but it's been important to me to kind of weigh in, or share, my experience with this, my experience with, sort of bits and pieces of my life story, and then, the drinking and how the drinking started, and, and again, part of a big reason why the drinking did start was because, just like everybody else, I just wanted to feel normal. I wanted to be accepted. I wanted to be a part of something. And it took over. It took over my life. And I let it take it over. And then ultimately it almost ended my life. I barely came out unscathed. I barely came out. I was on the brink. I was literally on the brink. But then I asked God to pull me out. I asked for God's help, and He pulled me out. And I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for that. So I praise God for that, to say the least. So yeah, if anyone out there is in need of, if you need help, ask for it. But you do have to want it, even just a little bit. But ask for it. There's so many people out there that, I'm just happy to be able to share this, and I hope this helps somebody.